All right, so today we're going to be making another project. So we're going to be making rock, paper, scissors, and this is going to be made in Java. So, so basically, rock, paper, scissors. The way we're going to do this is first we're going to be scanning user for input in order to let the user type in what their choice is. So the user can choose between rock, paper, scissors, and then we're going to generate a random computer that is going to choose a rock, paper, or scissors. So that's basically how we're going to lay out this program.
In order to start our program, let's first import the necessary classes that we need in order for our program to work efficiently and effectively.
All right, so the first line that we're going to import is import java.util.scanner. So essentially, this is going to give us the ability to scan user for input. And then our next line import is going to be import java.lang.math. So basically, we can use math.random in order to select randomly.
That's pretty much the only method we're going to be using from this class. We're not going to be using some of the other useful methods from this class, like square root or something else or other things.
All right, so in our main method, the first step we're going to do is scan user for input in order to choose between rock, paper, scissors. So the way we're going to do this is scanner scan equals new scanner and in parentheses system.in.
What this effectively does for us is it creates an object of the scanner class, which is what we imported out of the util package earlier. And it calls a constructor to create this object, obviously. And the system.in represents the ability to allow user input to our program.
All right, so our next line of code, we're actually going to have a variable that stores that user input. So since it's going to be a string, right? We have rock, paper, scissors, which are strings. So we're going to create a variable of string. So string choice is equal to scan.nextLine.
The next line is the next line method that we're calling here on our object is a method of the scanner class. And it's a useful method to allow user input for strings. Essentially, that's what we use this for. So string input, and that's why we're specifying that it's going to be a string. It doesn't have to only be strings. It can obviously be numbers and stuff, but what we can input and what we have the ability to input using this method is a string, and that's why we're using the method next line instead of something like next int or next double.
All right, so our next line of code is going to be int n equals 0. So the reason why we're doing this is, so basically how we're going to simulate the game is we're going to have a while loop. So this while loop is going to be simulating the entire game, right? We're going to have many conditions in that while loop to check whatever the user is entering and whatever is the computer is randomly choosing for us. So we're going to compare rock, for example, to rock and account for that if it's a tie, if you win or if you lose. And so that's basically how we're going to be simulating the entire game. And in this case, we're going to use a while true loop. And after we've simulated the entire game, we're going to end that while true loop.
So basically what this is doing, as Arnesh mentioned, is we're going to set up a while loop where this while loop is going to act as our and it's optional. You don't need this while loop. There's other ways to do this, but the while loop is going to act as a way for us to stop our program once we complete the program. Once we complete the one simulation of the game. For example, if the user types in here into the string choice, if they type in rock, for example, we go into our while loop, and n is obviously 0, so it goes in and it compares a bunch of options. So if it's like it compares it with rock and scissors, rock and paper, and based on that it outputs if you win, you lose, or you tie. And then after it does that, regardless of the outcome, it's going to exit the while loop. So obviously this is not the only way you can implement the code, but this is just one way out of the many other ways to do so.
All right, so in this while loop, the first thing that we actually need to do in this case is initialize a variable that is either going to randomly generate rock, paper, or scissors. And this is essentially what the computer is randomly going to generate for us. So the way we do this is int random is equal to int. So cast, you say in parentheses int. And then after those parentheses, we say in parentheses mat.random. And then we do times 2. So essentially, when you're doing mat.random times 2, the times 2 basically means how many numbers is in the range that you want to generate, right? So this mat.random times 2 is only going to be generating 2 values, but it's going to be between 0 and 1. Since mat.random is going to start at 0, but times 2 essentially means you're going to have 2 values. So you're going to have 0 and 1 in this case. And basically the output of that is going to be stored inside the variable random.
Yeah, I think you misspoke there. It's going to be actually 0, 1, and 2 because our starting point is 0. So basically another way to write this is we can do math.random times 2 plus 0, and this 0 represents our starting point, and it's including that starting point. So it's not like it's inclusive, it's not exclusive. So the possible outcomes here is going to be 0, 1, 0, 1, and obviously we want another option, so we have to expand this. So we can expand this by
3. So basically we have 3 options. We have rock, paper, and scissors. So since that's 3, we're going to be switching that to 3. So now we have mat.random times 3 plus 0. Our 3 values in this case is going to be 0, 1, and 2. And now after we have this line of code, now we can check what the variable has. So if random equals 0, so if random equals 0, then we're going to print out what the computer chose. So in this case, if random is 0, then the computer is going to choose rock. So system.out.println, and basically in quotation marks, you say computer choice and rock. Since if random equals 0, then it's rock. And then our next condition, so after that condition, then we have else if, which means if the first condition is not true, then it's going to check the else if. And then we say if random is equal to 1, which is the second value in that mat.random range. So if random equals 1, then we're going to print out that the computer chose paper.
And another thing we have to do after all of this is what we can do is we can either do just an else, and that would just be if these 2 conditions are not met, then it would go to this last one. Or you can do like another else if or something like that, where if else if random equals 2, but it's not necessary. This is something that's easier to do.
Right. So in this else, we're going to basically print out computer chose scissors, since that's the last option we have for rock, paper, scissors.
And also after, well, before this or after this, it's up to you. We have to also specify what the user typed in. And this is not necessary because it's obviously the user knows what he or she typed in because they can see that in the console. But if it's something that you can do just to be more organized. So let's do that.
All right, so now we're gonna check for now we're gonna have the conditions, right? Now we're gonna check if rock is rock, then that's a tie. If rock goes against paper, then paper wins against rock, so paper is gonna win. And then the last one, rock, scissors. Now rock wins against scissors, so it's gonna win. So that's basically how we're gonna be formatting the rest of our while loop. We're actually gonna be checking what the user typed in and what the computer generated. So the first thing we're going to do here is if choice dot equals, and recall when you're comparing 2 strings in Java, you have to use dot equals to compare their values. So in that equals, then you're going to say rock. So basically choice is what the user typed in. So if the user typed in rock, and in that condition, so yeah, curly braces. So in that condition, now we're going to have to check if whatever the computer generated is a rock. So if you would say random equals 0, And essentially random equals 0 means the computer chose rock. So if it equals rock, now who's going to win against rock and rock? It's obviously a tie. So it's going to print out tie. And what is our next condition going to be?
The next condition is going to be, well, we can do another if you want to, but something that's a little bit better that we can choose is else if, which is going to be the next one. And it's going to be else if random equals 0, or next one is 1. So if random equals 1, we can system.out.print or println. Now this is a little bit, you need to know the game in order to determine what this is going to be. We established earlier that random equals 1 is going to be paper. And if we do rock and paper, who wins?
Paper wins. And since in this case, the computer is generating paper, now in this case, the computer is going to win, right? So it's going to have to output you lose.
Finally, we can do our else statement, which is basically else, which we saw earlier, is going to be if these two conditions are false, then it's going to go and resort to this last one. It has to resort to one of the three options. And if it enters this if loop or if condition. And so else, and then we have,
well, the only condition we have left, right? We considered tie, we considered you lose. So the only condition that is left is that you win. And therefore you say that message in a print line statement. So basically the rest of our conditions is going to be a similar format to this one, right? We're going to, if choice equals rock, we have a set of conditions in that condition. And our next set of conditions are going to be formatted like if choice equals scissors. And that's basically how we're going to format, like for if choice equals scissors, choice equals paper. And that's how we're going to assimilate the entire program in our while loop.
yes, and I accidentally, so what you should do is you should take this and you should move it up here. So make sure that you're efficient with your brackets and that you're not including stuff where it's not supposed to be. But you can always just check by just looking at the first one and then mapping it to the second one. Now, the next condition, the next possible option for us is if choice dot equals scissors. And if choice dot equals scissors, what we can do is we can copy and paste all of this code, but we have to change the tie, lose, and win portion because it's going to be different since we're looking at scissors.
All right, so now the main thing we need to change here is determining who actually wins and who loses, right? And since we say here that if we type in scissors and if the randomly generated, if the computer randomly generated a rock, paper, scissors, then we also need to account for those conditions, right? So if we choose scissors and the randomly generated chose rock, then who is the winner in that case?
In that case, you lose.
Right. So now we are checking if random equals 1. And recall here, what random equals 1 is basically scissors, right? And if we chose scissors and the randomly generated was scissors, then it's going to be a tie.
Finally, the else condition, which is basically if there is random equals 2. And since there's just one more option left, it has to be you win, which is going to be the final one.
Oh, one thing I want to point out is you see in the if random equals 0, like above, and you see the indent. Now, it would be much better to format it so that the if like random equals 0 is in the if the choice equals scissors. So you would give an indent to if random equals 0 so that it's more clear and that when people see it, they're not going to get confused. So in the nested condition, you have the first condition, and then the next condition, you would usually say that condition in an indent in order to avoid confusion.
Yes, that is something that you have to, that is very useful. As we recall earlier, I accidentally put this condition inside of this condition, which just doesn't make sense. And so this is something that's very useful. However, it won't be wrong. It won't be incorrect. Your program will still work if you have like this all the way like there, but it just looks bad. So you shouldn't do that. Be nice programmers.
Yes. All right. So our last condition we're going to have here is if the choice dot equals paper. And essentially, this is going to be similar to our other conditions. So we can copy and paste and account for the conditions afterwards. Right. So the last condition we have here is if choice equals paper. So that means if we type in paper and if the randomly generated is a rock, which is basically random equals 0, then who is going to win in this case?
You will win in this case because paper will defeat the rock.
Yes. All right. So the next condition is if random equals 1. So if the randomly generated is a scissors, and if we type in papers or paper, then who is going to win?
So in that case, scissors will cut the paper. So the computer is going to win. So in that case, you will lose.
Right. So our last condition that we need to account for is in the else. So the only condition remaining is a tie.
So that concludes the three main conditions that we have. One thing we could have also done here is we could have said this is else if and stuff, but that's just not required here because when you have like a bunch of if conditions inside if and else conditions inside, it kind of gets confusing to keep track of all of that, and so it's not necessary. It serves the same function essentially. So let's complete our code now by exiting the while loop. If you continue like this, then or if you don't have change your value for n, then what's going to essentially happen here is that this while loop is going to be going on forever and ever and ever. So that's obviously a problem, and there's not going to be just that, but like it won't let you choose another option because the choice input is before the while loop, and so that's not what we want to do. We want to just end our program. So what we'll do is after this here, make sure that you do it here, not like outside here because it won't be useful there. We just do n equals 2 0 or rather 1 or something other than 0. And then what we can do finally is exit our program, and we can just do a quick system.out. This is not necessary, but it's something that's useful, and just say you have completed the game. If you want to restart, just run, and that's going to conclude the program.
One thing I want to point out is you actually misspelled system, and then you also forgot the semicolon at the end. And make sure in Java that you end all your statements with a semicolon. All right, so now that we have this program, now we're going to test. So what we're going to basically do here is click that green button, run. All right, now we're running it, and we're going to let it compile.
Okay, so now we'll type in our choice. So say I wanted to choose rock. We can see here that the user input shows us that it's rock. The computer choice was paper. So in that case, you will lose because the paper will cover the rock.
All right, so to test more, we're going to rerun it, and to actually check if our program works, we need to run more test cases, right? So next we'll type out paper. So we'll let it compile.
It's very important to test your code a couple of times and not not be confident after just testing it once, because it could be that it worked due to luck.
Right, and that is also part of debugging, right? We need to check if we need to not just check one test case, but we need to also check for multiple test cases and check if there's actually a bug in our program. And that's what we're doing here in this case. So we're checking rock, paper, scissors. We keep checking. And if you see that a lot of test cases work, then that's a more likely chance that our program doesn't have bugs compared to rather than just testing it one time. And if it works only one time, then you're not so sure if it's gonna be fully functional. So that's what is an important process of debugging.
So now I would choose something random. Let's say I wanted to choose scissors. Make sure to spell scissors right. I sometimes get confused with that. And make sure to add the S. Obviously, this is not very user friendly because we have to also account for users who might accidentally spell this wrong, and for users who might forget the S at the end. But that's too sophisticated, and that's not required for this kind of a program where we're just using some basic logic and trying to get familiar with some of the basic methods in classes like scanner, math, next line, random, and stuff like that, where it's very useful for us to build a program like this to test our knowledge and to be aware of the way we can set up long programs like this. So if we press enter, we immediately get that we win, which is great, because the computer randomly generated papers or paper, and scissors and paper means you can cut the paper, which makes you the winner. And that's two runs. You can do more runs in your own time, but this is not complete. That's gonna complete the video here. There will be in the description a copy of this code. There's a new GitHub link that we will create for all the codes that we've created in the past. Will all be in that GitHub folder, so you can access all of those things, and it'll be updated in all the descriptions of the videos.
All right, so hopefully this project gave you an idea of how you can make your projects. Like we see starting off the series, we made a few projects and we're slowly building up so that we give you an idea of how we're actually, how you can make your projects. And here we're gonna provide the code so you can test it out, or you can also add on to it and do it on your own time.
That's right. See you next video.
Bye.